Debbie Cowling in St. Olave's Church in Toronto. Thank you for joining me for the beauty of Dutch art. Last year I visited the Netherlands, Haarlem, The Hague, Delft, Leiden, and Amsterdam. It's nice to share with the community who may or may not be able to visit the Netherlands. My past presentations have included Egypt and India. Here are my pictures. The first 5 slides are of the 15th century Grote Kerk in Haarlem. It was a Reformed Protestant church and former Catholic cathedral. The organ was the largest in the world, 100 feet high with 32-foot pedal towers. It's been played by Mendelssohn, Handel, and a 10-year-old Mozart in 1766. There are regularly scheduled concerts. The fan-vaulted cedar ceiling is from 1530. Some streets in Haarlem. The Frans Hals Museum features a 17th century art in 17th century building. His group portraits from 1616 brought him work chronicling Haarlem's prosperous middle class, a world of businessmen and professionals. The banquet of the officers of St. George Militia Company. In 1616, tiny Holland was the richest country on earth, and these men reflect the exuberant spirit of the Dutch Golden Age. In contrast, Peter Bruegel's painting, a 16th century artist known for his peasant scenes. Jacobus Zaphius, one of Hall's earlier paintings from 1611. It's one of my favorites. Portrait of a 56-year-old man, possibly Willem van Warmeraat from 1640. Portrait of Nicholas Vandermeer from 1631. The beautiful interior of the museum. A painting of the Grote Kerk. Break time at Brownies and Downies, a chain of cafes in the Netherlands that employs special needs people with Down syndrome and help them become financially independent. A staff member at the takeout counter who recommended his favorites, Blondie Stroopwafel and Jubileum Brownie. I had to try them both. Very sweet. The Corrie ten Boom House. Corrie was the daughter of a Christian Haarlem watchmaker, and her family lived above the large shop. They sheltered hundreds of Jews and Dutch-resistant men and women. This is the other half of the Anne Frank story, from the point of view of those who risk their lives to save others. The hiding place was a narrow space behind a false wall in Corrie's bedroom. It was less than a yard deep, but its length could hold 6 people at a time. The living room above the shop was recreated to show how it would have looked in the 1940s. The family were devout Christians and hosted prayer meetings in their home for both Christians and Jews. Break time at the Frietkammer. My hotel recommended this as the best fries shop in Haarlem. Fresh cut fries with mayo, curried mayo, truffled mayo, or cheese. Delicious. In Delft, the new church from 1381 Formerly known as St. Ursula, this was the burial place for the princes of Orange. The church interior and its tower, known for the chime of its bells. Delftware, also known as Dutch blue, is a glazed earthenware made since 1653. Copies abound in the Netherlands, but the real Delftware is beautiful and expensive. The Hague. Marat House is a 17th century palace housing the works of Rembrandt, Rubens, Vermeer, Jan Steen, Frans Hals, and Van Dyck. Rembrandt's The Anatomy Lesson of Dr. Tulp from 1632. This was intended to be on display at the Surgeons Guild. This lifelike portrait shows surgeons focusing on the subject and the great contrast between light and dark. Rembrandt's portrait of a man with a feathered beret. Rembrandt's portrait of an elderly man, 1667. Rembrandt's portrait of Homer. Rembrandt's self-portrait as a 63-year-old man, one of three dating to 1669. It was one of his last in a series of 80 self-portraits. It's one of my favorites. Vermeer's The Girl with the Pearl Earring, his most famous painting. It is not a portrait, but a trony, a painting of an imaginary figure. The girl is in exotic dress, wearing an oriental turban, and has an improbably large pearl in her ear. Vermeer was a master of light, showing the softness of the girl's face, the light on her moist lips, and of course, the shining pearl. This painting has been displayed worldwide, but Marat House decided in 2014 it will not leave the museum. It's worth a trip to see this masterpiece. Madonna and Child by Quentin Massys from 1525. The Virgin is sitting on a richly decorated throne with baby Jesus. The child has his arms around his mother's neck. Many of Massey's works are religious. The Britius Museum in The Hague. It is a beautifully restored 18th century interior with period furniture. It houses one Rembrandt painting, several of his etchings, and other Dutch artists. The Head of Christ by Rembrandt, painted after 1648. This painting is based on a Jewish model. There are several versions of the Head of Christ. This painting is small, 10 inches by 8 inches, but spectacular. A Day Trip to Leiden, the birthplace of Rembrandt in 1606. He was the 9th child of a miller. Rembrandt monument near where his house stood. Rembrandt's house location, sadly not preserved. Only a plaque indicates where the house stood. Gerrit Dou from 1613 to 75. His house in Leiden is now an antique shop, but it survived. Dew was a pupil of Rembrandt at 14 and apprenticed for 3 years. He became an independent painter. He is known for his exceptional detailing and is referred to as the first fine painter in Leiden. Dew's Woman with a Candle from 1661. Dew's Astronomer by Candlelight from 1650. Both paintings are in the Museum de Lachenhal in Leiden. Rembrandt worked in this studio as a young man. St. Peter's Kirk in Leiden, 1412. From a Catholic church to a Reformed church to a multifunctioning meeting place. This is the church where Rembrandt sang as a choir boy in worship services. It is also the site of the Rembrandt family grave, although Rembrandt was buried in Amsterdam. Exam time. Break time in Scheveningen, a North Sea spa town, famous in the late 1800s. There are miles of sandy beaches, and it's just a tram ride from The Hague. Gregorian Grace performed at a deconcentrated church in The Hague. The singers and musicians are from Poland and were performing throughout Europe. Classic Gregorian chants leading to a finale of Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah. The National Holocaust Namen Memorial, remembering victims of the Holocaust. There were 140,000 Jews in the Netherlands, and 102,000 did not survive. All their names are memorialized here. Stumbling stones, found on cobblestone streets, engraved with the names of some of the deported during World War II. Jude's Museum. This is part of the Jewish Cultural Quarter, dedicated to Jewish history, culture, and religion. The Torah, the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. The Portuguese Synagogue, a 17th century Sephardic synagogue. It was one of the largest and richest in Europe during the Dutch Golden Age. Descendants of Spanish and Portuguese Jews escaping the Inquisition or forced conversion settled here. Anne Frank. We all know of this young girl who lived in hiding for 2 years before being discovered and sent to Auschwitz. It was a highly emotional visit to see her house and hiding place. No interior photographs were permitted. The Anne Frank statue, a simple statue of the young girl. The front door of the Frank house. Museum visitors enter around the corner. The Tulip Museum. Tulips came to the Netherlands in the late 16th century from Turkey. Some tulips look like they've been painted, yellow with red stripes or white with lilac. More Dutch artistry. The Cheese Museum. A rainy day in Amsterdam, and a dad took his child and dog out on a bicycle with a cart in front to a cafe. Homo Monument, a monument to the gay victims of World War II and all LGBTI people who have been or are still being persecuted. A typical canal with houseboats. It's great to take a canal cruise as it gets you up close to these compact residences. Minimalism at its best. A beautiful house from 1616. Rembrandt statue in Rembrandt Square. Okay, booking.com gets some free publicity, but I often use this app. Rembrandt House Museum, where Rembrandt lived and worked from 1639 to 1656, until he declared bankruptcy. Rembrandt was forced to sell everything, so what you see has been restored by period furniture and engravings. Jodenbriestraat. Rembrandt's house is number 4. Rembrandt House. A tavern across the street, where the bartender told my daughter that Rembrandt would come in for a drink. I asked whether it was his ghost because he died 26 years before the tavern was built. Tourists. This would have been Rembrandt's bed in an alcove, with velvet curtains to keep out the cold. Rembrandt's pictures, not his paintings. There are none of his paintings in this house museum, but a great collection of etchings, protected in glass frames. Inside the front door. Could you imagine Rembrandt here? Copper plate printing. Rembrandt made many copper plates to reproduce etchings. When he had financial difficulties, he produced more than the usual from a plate, lessening the quality. The museum has a great selection of etchings, but these are just copies to show as an example. His studio. Rembrandt mixed his own paints, including a lead-white pigment, corroded metallic lead, along with organic substances like linseed oil. This was his studio, where he had students painting as well. It had great light from the top floor, front of the house. From the Rijksmuseum, Rembrandt's famous night watch, measuring 12 feet by 14 feet. He painted it in 1642, and it was a group of civic guards. The captain and his 17 guards each paid 100 guilders to be in this commissioned work. This was a fortune. Rembrandt's use of light and dark are much in evidence in this painting. Possibly Saskia, Rembrandt's wife, in the night watch. Rembrandt can also be seen in the background. Rembrandt's self-portrait as the Apostle Paul in 1661. Rembrandt's The Jewish Bride, 1665. Speculation on who the couple might be. From the Old Testament, perhaps Abraham and Sarah, or Isaac and Rebekah. This painting is viewed as one of the greatest expressions of the fusion of spiritual and physical love in the history of painting. Vermeer's A Street in Delft, a plain row of worn houses with great attention to detail, cracked masonry, and peeling paint. Vermeer's The Milkmaid, a maidservant pours milk while everything else is still. Light streams in from the window. Dutch colonialism, as evidenced by the Dutchman and his slave. Sadly, this was the golden age of colonialism. It established colonial rule, mainly in the coastal areas of Africa. For over 300 years, Dutch slave traders shipped adults and children to Suriname, Aruba, Bonaire, Curacao, Saint Martin, and other locations to serve Dutch plantation owners. Gerrit Dou, Woman with a Book. It is thought to be Rembrandt's mother. Rembrandt as a young man. A Dutch group portrait. Rembrandt and his son Titus. Sadly, he died 1 year before his father. The Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam, dedicated to the works of Vincent van Gogh and his contemporaries, built in 1973. Every museum has a gift shop, and this one was excellent. Van Gogh painted 43 self-portraits between 1885 and 1889. Some famous ones were the self-portrait with a gray felt hat and the self-portrait with a straw hat. Almond blossoms. Large blossoms against a blue sky were one of Van Gogh's favorite subjects. He gifted it to his brother following the birth of his son, Vincent Willem, named after him. Our daughter Louisa and the almond blossom. Irises, painted while he was in a psychiatric hospital in Saint-Rémy de Provence in 1890. He wanted a sharp contrast from the yellow to the purple flowers. Although the red pigment faded, the irises are now blue. Van Gogh, and a close-up of his brushstrokes. Sunflowers from Arles, 1889. He painted 5 large canvases using 3 shades of yellow and nothing else. Van Gogh's bedroom where he stayed in Arles. It shows simple furniture and his own paintings on the wall. The room's walls were not symmetrical, so it looks crooked. A car parked on the street, decorated with Van Gogh's almond blossoms. Break time. a street musician performing Coldplay's hits. He plays with the Philharmonic Orchestra. This is his side hustle and has CDs for sale. Sure, I bought one. Concertgebouw, built in 1888, is one of the most famous concert halls with great acoustics. I managed to get tickets to see the graduating class of student performers. Break time at Simon Meissen. They are famous for coffee, sandwiches, and especially almond croissant. I walked from the hotel to the shop each morning after discovering them. MoCo, a museum of modern and contemporary art, built in 2016. Banksy, a fake name for an English-based street artist and political activist, showing a policeman with a smile emoji. A flower thrower. And a girl with a balloon. I hope you enjoyed my presentation of the art of the Netherlands. I enjoyed my visit, the third to this beautiful country. The art, architecture, and the people make it a memorable holiday. Thanks to Janice Douglas for arranging this online recording. Good night.